A down-on-his-luck janitor walked into a job interview, desperate for a second chance. But when the CEO, a powerful woman with a secret pain, looked into his eyes, she didn't offer him a job. She asked him to marry her. What happened next? This is a story about shattered pride, unexpected love, and the courage to rewrite your destiny. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss how this unbelievable love story unfolds. The Last Chance. The rain fell in relentless sheets over Chicago, turning the streets into shimmering rivers of reflected neon. Marcus Boone hunched his shoulders against the cold, his fingers tightening around the strap of his worn duffel bag. Inside it held everything that mattered: a change of clothes, a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and a single creased photo of his 6-year-old daughter Lily, her gap-toothed smile frozen in time. He was late. The bus had broken down 3 blocks from the towering glass monolith of Verdant Industries, and Marcus had sprinted the rest of the way, his dress shoes, bought secondhand and never quite broken in, rubbing blisters into his heels. He didn't care. This interview was his last shot. The lobby was all marble and steel, the kind of place that made a man like Marcus feel like he was trespassing. He wiped his damp palms on his slacks, the only decent pair he owned, now wrinkled from the rain. The receptionist, a sharp-eyed woman named Lena, according to her nameplate, looked up from her computer, her gaze flickering over him like she was tallying up his flaws. The scuffed shoes. The too-tight collar of his thrift store button-down. The way his hands, calloused from years of construction work before the accident, twitched at his sides. "Marcus Boone," he said, forcing his voice steady. "I have a 5:30 interview with Ms. Verdant." Lena's manicured nails tapped the keyboard. "You're 17 minutes late." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "Bus trouble. I called ahead." She sighed as if his existence alone was an inconvenience and picked up the phone. "Mr. Boone is here." Pause. "Yes. I'll send him up." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was silent, save for the hum of machinery and the too loud thud of Marcus's heartbeat in his ears. He'd been a foreman once, respected, with a crew who'd trusted him. Then the scaffolding collapsed. Then the surgeries. Then the bills. Then the hollow look in his ex-wife's eyes when she said, "I can't do this anymore," and took Lily with her. Until the diagnosis, until she handed their daughter back like a debt she couldn't pay. Now janitorial work was all he could get. The doors slid open. Eleanor Verdant's office was a study in controlled power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sleek furniture, a single-framed abstract painting that probably cost more than Marcus's entire life. And behind the desk Nora Verdant was younger than he'd expected, mid-30s at most, her dark hair pulled into a flawless knot. She wore no wedding ring. Her suit was crisp, her posture effortless, but her eyes, sharp, assessing, locked onto him with an intensity that made his breath hitch. "Mr. Boone." She didn't stand. Didn't smile. "Ms. Verdant." He forced himself not to fidget. "I appreciate the opportunity." She picked up his resume, a single, pathetic page, and set it down without reading it. "You were in construction. 12 years. And now you clean toilets." His fingers curled. "Yes." For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Not pity. Something closer to recognition. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Tell me about your daughter." Marcus stiffened. "That's not on my resume." "No," she agreed. "But it's in your eyes." A beat of silence. Then, against his better judgment, he reached into his wallet and slid the photo of Lily across the desk. "She's 6. Loves dinosaurs. Wants to be a paleontologist." His throat tightened. "She's also got a rare blood disorder. The treatments, they're expensive." Nora studied the photo. Then, abruptly, she stood and walked to the window, her back to him. The city lights painted her silhouette in gold. "Mr. Boone," she said finally, "what if I told you I'm not offering you a job?" His stomach dropped. Then she turned, her gaze unreadable. "But a marriage proposal." The proposition. Marcus Boone was certain he'd misheard. The words hung between them, absurd and impossible, like something out of a bad movie. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Excuse me?" Nora Verdant didn't blink. She walked back to her desk, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and sat down with the same calm as if she'd just offered him coffee. "You heard me correctly." Marcus stared at her. The woman was serious. A dozen thoughts crashed through his mind. Was this a joke? A test? Some kind of corporate power play? But Nora's expression gave nothing away. She simply waited, watching him with those unreadable dark eyes. He exhaled sharply. You don't even know me. I know enough. She tapped a finger lightly against the edge of his resume. You're a hard worker. You've faced setbacks and kept going. You're loyal, 12 years with the same company before the accident. And you're desperate. The last word landed like a punch. His jaw tightened. Nora continued, unfazed. I have a problem. You have a problem. This could solve both. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not some charity case you can toy with. I came here for a job. A real one. And I'm offering you something better. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder, sliding it toward him. Open it. He hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside was a contract, thick, legal, filled with clauses and stipulations. His eyes skimmed the first page before locking onto one line in particular. Spousal agreement term 18 months. His stomach twisted. You can't be serious. Completely. Nora steepled her fingers. Here's the situation. My company is on the verge of a major merger, but certain, traditional investors prefer dealing with a CEO who has a stable personal life. A husband, specifically. Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Appearances matter. Marcus let out a slow breath. So you want to rent a husband? I want a mutually beneficial arrangement. She nodded toward the contract. In exchange for your cooperation, you'll receive a monthly stipend, full medical coverage, including experimental treatments for your daughter, and a lump sum at the end of the term. The mention of Lily's treatments made his chest constrict. He looked away, his fingers tightening on the edge of the folder. Nora's voice softened just slightly. I've done my research, Mr. Boone. I know how much her care cost. I also know you've been turned down by 3 hospitals for financial reasons. A muscle in his jaw jumped. She wasn't wrong. The last rejection letter was still crumpled in his pocket, a constant reminder of his failure. He swallowed hard. And what exactly would this arrangement involve? Public appearances. Social events. Playing the part of a devoted spouse in front of the right people. She paused. No romantic obligations. This is strictly business. Marcus let out a humorless laugh. So I'd be your trophy husband. If you want to put it that way. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the city outside the windows felt suddenly too loud, the office too small. You should say no. Walk away. The whole thing was insane. But then he thought of Lily, of the way her face lit up when she talked about dinosaurs, of the way she'd squeezed his hand last week after another round of tests and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. I'm tough." He closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, Nora was watching him, waiting. "What's the catch?" he asked quietly. She tilted her head. "No catch. But there is one condition." "Which is?" "You can't tell anyone the truth. Not your daughter, not your friends, no one. As far as the world is concerned, we're madly in love." Marcus exhaled sharply. Lying to Lily? That was the one thing he'd sworn never to do. But if it meant saving her life. His throat felt dry. How soon would this start? Nora's lips curved into a satisfied smile. The paperwork can be finalized tomorrow. The wedding would be in 2 weeks. Wedding. The word sent a jolt through him. Before he could respond, the office door swung open. Lena, the receptionist, stepped in with a tray of coffee, her gaze flickering between them with thinly veiled curiosity. "Your espresso, Miss Verdant," she said smoothly, setting it down. "Thank you, Lena." Nora's tone was cool, dismissive. Lena hesitated, her eyes lingering on Marcus a beat too long before she turned to leave. As the door clicked shut behind her, Marcus caught the faintest tightening of Nora's jaw. He frowned. She doesn't know? No one does. Nora picked up her coffee, her voice dropping. And no one can. Not until the merger is finalized. Marcus studied her for a long moment. There was something beneath her polished exterior, a tension, a guardedness. This wasn't just about business. There was more to it. But before he could ask, Nora set down her cup and met his gaze squarely. "So, Mr. Boone," she said, "do we have a deal?" The weight of the decision pressed down on him. It was reckless. It was insane. But for Lily? He took a deep breath. And nodded. The contract. The penthouse elevator doors slid open with a near-silent hum, revealing a space so immaculate it looked like a magazine spread. Marcus Boone stepped inside, his worn duffel bag suddenly feeling absurdly out of place against the sleek marble foyer. The air smelled faintly of lemons and something expensive, sandalwood maybe. Nora Verdant moved past him, her heels clicking against the polished floors as she tossed her keys onto a glass console table. "Make yourself at home," she said, though her tone suggested it was more a formality than an invitation. Marcus hesitated before setting his bag down carefully on the floor. "You live here alone?" She shot him a look as she poured herself a drink from the crystal decanter on the bar. "Does it look like I have roommates?" "Right. Stupid question." He exhaled, running a hand over his face. Less than 48 hours ago, he'd been scrubbing bathroom floors at a community center. Now he was standing in a penthouse that probably cost more than he'd make in 10 lifetimes, about to sign a contract to marry a woman he barely knew. The absurdity of it all should have made him laugh. Instead, his stomach twisted. Nora handed him a tumbler of amber liquid. He took it, their fingers brushing briefly. She didn't react. "Read it thoroughly," she said, nodding toward the thick stack of papers on the coffee table. "Then we'll discuss terms." Marcus sank into the plush leather sofa, the contract heavy in his hands. The legalese blurred together at first, but a few phrases jumped out. Non-disclosure agreement in perpetuity. Monthly compensation, $15,000. Medical coverage extended to one dependent, Lily Boone. Cohabitation required for duration of contract. His grip tightened on the papers. 18 months, he said slowly. Nora sipped her drink. 18 months and you walk away with an additional $200,000. Enough to give your daughter a fresh start. The number made his pulse stutter. It was more money than he'd ever had in his life. Enough to cover Lily's treatments, a better apartment, maybe even a small house someday. But, and if I say no? Nora studied him over the rim of her glass. Then you walk out that door and we pretend this never happened. Simple as that. Marcus set the contract down and stood, needing to move. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. At this height, Chicago glittered like a spilled jewel box, all sharp edges and distant lights. He thought of Lily's last hospital visit. The way the doctor had said, "We're running out of options," with that careful, practiced sympathy. His reflection in the glass looked exhausted. Behind him, Nora's voice cut through the silence. "I need an answer by tonight." He turned. She hadn't moved from the sofa, her posture still perfect, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, not quite desperation but close. This wasn't just business for her either. Marcus picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" Later, in the guest bedroom, because of course there was a guest bedroom, Marcus sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at his phone. Lily's photo smiled back at him from the lock screen. He should call his sister. Tell someone. But the NDA was already in effect, and Nora had made the consequences of breaking it painfully clear. A knock at the door. "Come in." Nora entered, now dressed in silk pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without the armor of her suit, she looked younger, softer. "You're still awake," she observed. "Could say the same about you." She hesitated, then sat in the armchair across from him. "We should discuss logistics." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Not those logistics," she said dryly. "Public appearances. How we'll present ourselves." "Right. The performance." He rubbed his temples. "So what's the story? How did we meet?" "Through mutual friends. A charity gala." She rattled it off like she'd rehearsed it. "You were there representing the community center where you volunteered." "Volunteered? You do now." She tossed a glossy brochure onto the bed. "Tomorrow you start at the Oak Ridge Children's Hospital. 3 days a week. It'll give our relationship credibility." Marcus picked up the brochure. The hospital logo stared back at him, the same one where Lily had spent last winter. His throat tightened. Nora was watching him. "Problem?" He shook his head. "No. It's good." A beat of silence. Then unexpectedly she asked, "What's her name?" "Lily." The word came out rough. "She's 6. Nora's expression did something complicated. "She'll need to meet me eventually. If we're convincing." Marcus's chest ached. The thought of introducing Lily to this farce. "I know," was all he said. Nora stood. "Get some sleep. We have a press conference at 8. She was almost to the door when Marcus spoke again. "Why me?" She stilled. "You could have hired an actor," he continued. "Someone who knows how to play the part." Nora turned, her hand on the doorknob. The hallway light cast her face in shadow. "Because actors lie," she said quietly. "I needed someone who knew how to tell the truth." Then the door clicked shut, leaving Marcus alone with the weight of what he'd just agreed to. Outside, the city lights burned on, indifferent. Somewhere beneath them, in a cramped apartment, Lily was waiting for her dad to come home. And for the first time in years, Marcus Boone put his head in his hands and cried. The performance The morning of the press conference arrived with a quiet tension that clung to the penthouse like static. Marcus stood in front of the floor-length mirror, adjusting the collar of his new suit, charcoal gray, tailored to fit him in a way no clothing ever had. Felt like a costume. Nora appeared in the doorway, already immaculate in a navy dress that screamed both power and elegance. She assessed him with a critical eye before nodding once. "You clean up well." Marcus resisted the urge to tug at his tie. "Never been one for suits." "You'll get used to it." She stepped closer, her fingers brushing his as she adjusted his tie. The contact was brief, professional, but it sent an unexpected jolt through him. Her perfume was subtle, something citrus and sharp like her. He cleared his throat. "So how does this work? Do we have a script?" "Just follow my lead." She smoothed his lapel, her gaze meeting his. "And remember, from this moment forward, we're madly in love." The words settled between them, heavy with unspoken implications. The press conference was held in the glittering lobby of Verdant Industries, cameras flashing as they stepped onto the small stage together. Marcus's pulse roared in his ears. He'd faced down collapsing scaffolding and angry foremen, but nothing had prepared him for this. The scrutiny of dozens of strangers dissecting his every move. Nora's hand found his, her fingers lacing through his with practiced ease. He could feel the eyes tracking the gesture. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly, "I'm thrilled to introduce you to the man who's changed my life, Marcus Boone, my fiancé." The room erupted in murmurs. A reporter near the front raised her hand. "Ms. Verdant, this seems rather sudden. How long have you been together?" Nora's smile was beatific. 6 wonderful months. Marcus kept his expression carefully neutral. 6 months ago, he'd been elbow-deep in a backed-up toilet at the community center. Another reporter called out, "Marcus, what do you do for work?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. He felt Nora's fingers tighten around his. Before he could respond, she smoothly interjected, "Marcus has dedicated his career to helping others. He's currently heading up a new initiative with Oak Ridge Children's Hospital." The lie tasted bitter, but Marcus played his part, nodding along as Nora artfully deflected more probing questions. He watched her work the room, charming, disarming, utterly in control, and realized with sudden clarity why she'd needed someone like him. Actors could pretend, but only someone with real scars could sell this kind of performance. Later in the car ride home, the facade cracked. Nora sagged against the leather seat, her perfect posture finally slipping. "You did well," she said quietly. Marcus stared out the window at the passing city. That was how. A small, unexpected laugh escaped her. "It gets easier." The car turned a corner, sunlight flashing across her face, and for the first time, Marcus saw the faint shadows under her eyes, the tension at the corners of her mouth. "You're exhausted," he realized. She didn't deny it. "This merger means everything. Not just to the company but to me." There was something raw in her voice, an honesty she hadn't allowed before. Marcus hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in him since the beginning. "Why is this so important?" The car slowed to a stop at a red light. Nora watched the pedestrians crossing the street, her profile unreadable. "Because my father built this company," she said finally. "And I need to prove I can run it better than he ever did." The vulnerability in her words hung between them, fragile as glass. Marcus reached over without thinking, his hand covering hers. "You will." She looked down at their joined hands, then up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then the car lurched forward, breaking the moment. Nora straightened, pulling her hand away as the walls slid back into place. "Tomorrow," she said briskly, "we meet with the investors. They'll be harder to convince than the press." Marcus nodded, the ghost of her touch still warm on his skin. That night, lying in the too-soft guest bed, Marcus stared at the ceiling. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister. "Lily asked when you're coming home. What should I tell her?" His chest ached. He typed back slowly. "Soon. Tell her I love her." The door to his room creaked open. Nora stood silhouetted in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. "I can't sleep," she admitted, her voice uncharacteristically small. Marcus sat up. For the first time, she looked less like the formidable CEO and more like just a woman, her hair mussed from tossing and turning, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. Without a word, he shifted over on the bed, making space. Nora hesitated, then crossed the room and sat beside him, leaving careful inches between them. The mattress dipped under her weight. They sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of the city below. After a long moment, Nora spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think we can really pull this off? Marcus looked at her, really looked, at the uncertainty in her eyes, the way her fingers twisted in the fabric of her robe. And for the first time since this began he realized he wanted to. Yeah, he said quietly. I think we can. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the Chicago skyline. Love often comes when we least expect it, in the middle of a lie, in the quiet before dawn. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable moments. And tell us in the comments, would you make a deal like Nora and Marcus did? Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of this extraordinary journey.